The massive sensor dish of Galactic Station Prime rotated slowly in the void, its crystalline surface catching the light of 3 nearby suns. Chief Operator Xylac's 4 arms danced across the control panels as warning lights began flashing. Across his console, something was approaching from the outer rim, moving at impossible speeds. Admiral Vextar to the command deck, the station's AI announced in its melodic tone. Priority alert. Admiral Vextar, a towering reptilian being, with scales that shifted color with his emotions, materialized on the bridge through the transport beam. His scales flickered from calm blue to alarmed orange as he studied the readings. "What are we looking at, Xylac?" the Admiral asked, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd commanded fleets across 7 star systems. "Unknown vessel." "Sir, it's different." Xylac's main eyes focused on the screen, while his auxiliary eyes monitored other instruments. "The ship appears to be alive somehow. Its hull is shifting, breathing like some kind of creature." On the massive holographic display, the vessel came into view. It looked nothing like any known ship design. Instead of rigid metal and sharp angles, this craft flowed like liquid mercury frozen in space. Veins of light pulsed beneath its surface, and the entire hull seemed to expand and contract rhythmically, as if drawing breath from the cosmic winds. The bridge crew of various alien species stood mesmerized. Security Chief Moravec, a stone-like being from the mineral world, stepped forward. "Sir, its energy signature is unlike anything in our databases. It's giving off readings that shouldn't be possible." "Range?" Vextar demanded. 50,000 kilometers and closing. "But Admiral..." Xylac paused, his tentacles quivering with confusion. "It's not using any propulsion system we can detect. It's moving through space, like it belongs there, like space itself is helping it along." The Admiral's scales shifted to deep purple, indicating deep thought mixed with concern. "Open all communication channels. Full spectrum broadcast." The communication officer, a graceful being with translucent skin that glowed softly, nodded. "Channels open, sir." "Unknown vessel. This is Admiral Vextar of the Galactic Council Defense Fleet. Identify yourself immediately and state your intentions." Static filled the bridge for several heartbeats. Then, cutting through the cosmic interference, came a response that made every being on the bridge freeze in shock. "This is Captain Kim Hyun of the human exploration vessel Harmony, requesting permission to dock under diplomatic protocols." The silence that followed was deafening. Several crew members looked at each other in disbelief. The communication officer's glow flickered rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation in her species. "That's impossible," whispered Chief Navigator Thorne, his insectoid features clicking nervously. "The Harmony vanished 11 years ago. We sent 3 search fleets, found nothing but empty space." Admiral Vextar's scales cycled through several colors before settling on deep red. "Captain Hyun, if that's truly who you are, you need to understand that your vessel was declared lost with all hands. The entire galaxy mourned your crew." "We understand your confusion, Admiral," came the reply. But something was different about the voice. It seemed to echo from multiple dimensions, carrying harmonics that made the bridge equipment hum in response. "We've been away learning, changing. We're not quite the same humans who left 11 years ago." Security Chief Moravec activated the defensive systems. "Sir, I recommend extreme caution. This could be some kind of trap or deception." "Negative on defensive measures," Vextar ordered. "If these are truly the survivors of the Harmony, they deserve our help, not our suspicion." The mysterious vessel continued its approach, and as it drew closer, more details became visible. The ship's surface rippled with patterns that looked almost like neural networks, and strange formations along its hull pulsed with bioluminescent light. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "Docking Bay 7 is cleared for your arrival," Vextar announced. "But Captain Hyun, I must inform you that the Council will want answers, many answers." "We understand, Admiral, and we have much to share. But be warned, what we've learned will change everything you think you know about our galaxy's future." As the Harmony approached the docking bay, every being on the station pressed against observation windows to catch a glimpse. The ship didn't land so much as flow into position, its hull adapting to fit perfectly within the docking clamps, without any apparent communication with station systems. The docking bay sealed, atmosphere was restored, and hundreds of eyes watched as the airlock began its cycle. Admiral Vextar stood with his senior staff at the entrance, his scales now shifting between anticipation and deep concern. The airlock hissed open, and what emerged defied every expectation. Captain Kim Hyun stepped forward, but he was no longer entirely human. His eyes held swirling galaxies in miniature, actual stars twinkling in the depths of his pupils. When he moved, space itself seemed to bend around him, creating ripples in the air that made nearby observers feel dizzy. Behind him came Lieutenant Park Soo, who appeared to be swimming through the atmosphere rather than walking. Her form flickered, occasionally, as if she existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The other crew members were equally transformed, each bearing changes that spoke of contact with forces beyond normal comprehension. "Admiral Vextar," Captain Hyun said, his voice creating harmonics that resonated through the metal decking. "Thank you for welcoming us home. We've seen what's coming to devour our galaxy. We've evolved to fight it. The question now is whether the rest of the galaxy is ready to evolve too." Deep beneath Galactic Station Prime, in chambers that few beings ever saw, the Council's most advanced technology hummed with nervous energy. The bio-neural link facility was a marvel of galactic engineering, allowing different species to share thoughts and memories directly through quantum consciousness bridges. Admiral Vextar stood before the massive chamber doors, his scales shifting through worried patterns. Around him, representatives from 12 major civilizations waited anxiously. The crystalline Hive Queen Zerath clicked her mandibles nervously, while Ambassador Corvain from the gas giant collectives rippled his translucent form with concern. "Are we certain this is safe?" asked Dr. Yelthan, the station's chief medical officer. Her tentacles coiled around her datapad as she reviewed the readings. "These humans, they're not registering on any of our biological scanners properly anymore. We need to know what they experienced," Vextar replied firmly. "If their claims about galactic threats are true, we can't afford to remain ignorant." The chamber doors slid open with a whisper, revealing a room that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. The walls curved impossibly, covered in neural conduits that pulsed with soft blue light. In the center, 12 biopods waited, their surfaces gleaming like liquid mercury. Captain Kim Hyun entered first, his transformed appearance causing several council members to step back instinctively. His eyes still held those swirling galaxies, and when he breathed, the air around him shimmered with energy that made reality itself seem unstable. "The link will allow us to share what we experience directly," Hyun explained, his voice creating harmonics that made the neural conduits respond with gentle chimes. "But I warn you, what you'll see will change you. Some knowledge can't be unknown." Dr. Li Ji floated into the chamber, her form now a mesmerizing blend of flesh and pure energy. Where her feet should have touched the floor, instead wisps of starlight danced. "The memories we carry aren't just ours anymore," she said, softly. "They belong to entire civilizations that no longer exist." Engineer Choi Min flickered into visibility, his body phasing between dimensions like a ghost caught between worlds. "We'll start slowly," he promised, though his form continued to shift and blur. "Your minds need time to adjust to what we've become." One by one, the council members entered the biopods. The neural gel embraced them gently, and quantum filaments connected to their consciousness centers. The process was usually painless, but today, as the links activated, several beings cried out in shock. The first memory hit them like a cosmic tsunami. They were aboard the original Harmony 11 years ago, watching their instruments go wild as they approached the galaxy's edge. Through the shared consciousness, they felt the excitement and fear of the human crew as they detected something massive lurking in the void between galaxies. "Contact bearing 07 Mark 12, came the voice of Navigator Kim Woo through the memory. "Distance, impossible to calculate, it's bigger than anything we've ever seen." The memory shifted, and suddenly they were looking through the Harmony's main viewer at something that shouldn't exist. It wasn't a ship or a creature. It was a wound in reality itself. Through the tear in space-time, things moved that had no form, no substance, yet somehow consumed everything they touched. Void shepherds, Dr. Lee Ji's voice echoed through the shared consciousness. That's what we learn to call them. They exist between dimensions, feeding on the energy that holds reality together. The council members watched in growing horror as the shepherds began their work. Entire star systems simply vanished, not destroyed but consumed, their matter and energy drained away until nothing remained but empty space. Planets with billions of inhabitants, suns that had burned for millions of years, all reduced to nothingness in moments. Ambassador Corvain's gaseous form rippled with distress as he experienced the memory of watching his home system's neighbor, galaxy, being systematically harvested. The screams, he whispered through the neural link. I can hear the screams of dying worlds. The memory shifted again, showing them the Andromeda Spiral Galaxy, or what remained of it, where once hundreds of billions of stars had shone. Now only scattered remnants drifted in the void. The shepherds had been thorough, leaving behind only the faintest traces of what had once been a thriving galactic community. 12 billion civilizations, Dr. Lee Ji's consciousness whispered to them. We managed to scan the debris fields. 12 billion different species all gone. Their final transmissions all said the same thing. Darkness was coming and nothing could stop it. Engineer Choi Min's fractured presence showed them the moment of decision. The human crew had realized. They couldn't escape, couldn't fight, couldn't hide. The shepherds had detected the harmony and were moving to consume it. We had seconds to choose, his memory revealed. Die as humans, or risk everything to become something new. The shared consciousness exploded with the agony of dimensional dissolution. The council members felt their atoms being torn apart, their consciousness scattered across multiple realities. But instead of death, they experienced something impossible, rebirth as hybrid beings existing between dimensions. The process was excruciating and beautiful at the same time. They felt themselves learning to touch the void itself, to exist in the spaces between heartbeats, between thoughts, between the very particles that made up reality. Hive Queen Zerath's consciousness recoiled from the intensity. You chose to become like them? Like the destroyers? Not like them, Captain Hyun's presence filled the neural space. We became something they couldn't understand or consume. We learned to exist in the cracks of reality, to feed on the energy they waste when they destroy. The final memory was the most terrifying. Through the transformed humans' enhanced senses, the Council experienced the shepherds' true nature. They weren't just consumers. They were gardeners of a sort, harvesting galactic civilizations like crops, feeding the energy to something vast and ancient, lurking in the spaces between universes. They're coming here next, Hyun's consciousness pressed against each council member individually. Our galaxy is ripe for harvest, but we've learned their methods, understood their weaknesses. We can fight them now. As the neural links disconnected, several council members collapsed, overwhelmed by what they'd experienced. Others sat in stunned silence, trying to process the reality of their situation. Admiral Vextar was the first to speak, his scales cycling through every color in his species' emotional spectrum. How long do we have? The advanced scouts are already here, Dr. Lee Ji replied, her energy form pulsing with urgency. The main harvest fleet will arrive within 1 galactic cycle. Maybe less? The chamber fell silent except for the gentle hum of the bio-neural equipment powering down. Everyone present now carried the weight of impossible knowledge. Their galaxy was doomed, unless they could learn to evolve as the humans had. But evolution, they were beginning to understand, required sacrifice that few species were prepared to make. The Great Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council had never seen such chaos. Representatives from hundreds of worlds shouted in dozens of languages, their voices creating a cacophony that made the translator systems overload and shut down completely. The massive chamber, built to accommodate every known species in the galaxy, trembled with the force of raw emotion and fear. Councillor Thexara, her mantis-like form towering above most other delegates, slammed her razor-sharp claws against her, speaking podium. The metallic ring echoed through the hall, demanding attention, her compound eyes fixed on Captain Kim Hyun, who stood calmly in the center of the chamber as reality bent and warped around his transformed presence. "Look at them," she screeched, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd seen 17 different wars. "These creatures claim to be human, but look with your own eyes. They float through dimensions like ghosts, their eyes burn with stolen starlight, and the very air bends around them. How can we trust beings who've abandoned their own species?" "Senator." Kryvex from the Silicon World stepped forward, his crystalline body chiming with each movement. "Counselor Thexara speaks truth. These beings have been changed by our enemies. For all we know, they're advanced scouts for these Void Shepherds, sent to weaken our defenses from within." The crowd erupted again. Security Chief Moravec activated, his defensive systems, his stone-like form glowing with protective energy fields. "Order! We must have order!" But his voice was lost in the storm of accusations and demands. From the observation deck, Admiral Vextar watched the proceedings with growing alarm. His scales shifted rapidly between colors, reflecting his internal struggle. Beside him, Dr. Yelthan coiled her tentacles nervously around her medical scanner. "The bio-readings are incredible," she whispered. "These humans exist in at least 4 dimensions simultaneously. Their cellular structure is part organic matter, part pure energy, and part something I can't even identify." Down in the assembly pit, Representative Corvain from the gas giant collectives rippled with agitation. "We should contain them immediately. Study them. Learn how this transformation works before they infect others." "Infect," Dr. Li Ji's voice cut through the noise like a blade. Though she appeared to be standing still, her energy form cast shadows that moved independently, reaching across the chamber to touch the minds of every delegate. "We didn't catch some disease. We chose evolution over extinction." Her words carried such power that several representatives stepped back involuntarily. The weaker psychic species in the assembly began to glow as her energy field affected their natural abilities. Ambassador Telrain from the Peaceful Worlds raised her 6 arms for attention. "Even if we believe your intentions are pure, you must understand our fear. You've returned as something beyond our comprehension. How can different species work together when one has become godlike?" Engineer Choi Min flickered into fuller visibility, his form solidifying as he focused his dimensional existence. "We understand your concerns. That's why we brought proof of our intentions." The massive display screens around the chamber activated, showing the exterior of the transformed Harmony. But instead of the sleek vessel they'd seen docking, the ship now revealed its true nature. The hull had opened like a flower, revealing chambers that seemed to extend infinitely inward. "Our cargo bay," Captain Hyun explained, gesturing toward the screens. "We've brought something that will change everything you think you know about the Shepherds." The camera feed descended into the ship's depths, passing through corridors that bent through impossible angles. The walls pulsed with the same energy that flowed through the transformed humans, and strange symbols flickered across every surface like living text. In the deepest chamber, suspended in a containment field that seemed to be made of crystallized space-time itself, hung an object that made every being in the assembly hall gasp in horror. It was a fragment of Shepherd technology, a jagged crystal the size of a transport pod that seemed to devour light itself. But more terrifying than its appearance were the images that flickered across its surface. Entire civilizations played out their final moments in the crystal's depths, their death screams somehow visible as flashes of color and shadow. 12 systems, Dr. Li Ji said softly, though her voice carried to every corner of the hall. "This fragment contains the final memories of 12 star systems the Shepherds consumed, billions of beings, reduced to pure energy and stored in this crystalline matrix." Counselor Thexara's aggressive posture faltered. You've brought death itself into our station." "Not death," Captain Hyun corrected, his form beginning to glow with increasing intensity. "Memory. And from memory, we've learned to create life." Engineer Choi Min approached one of the chamber's wall panels and placed his flickering hand against it. Immediately, the entire station's power systems began to fluctuate as something incredible happened. The crystal fragment pulsed once, twice, then began to change. The dark energy that had been consuming light suddenly reversed itself, and instead of darkness Brilliant illumination poured from its surface. The images of dying civilizations slowed, stopped, then began to run backward. "Impossible," breathed Senator Krivex, his crystalline form resonating with harmonics of disbelief. On the screens, they watched as the fragment began to recreate what it had consumed. Tiny holographic worlds appeared in the containment field, complete with miniature suns and swirling clouds. The energy patterns that had been stored as death were being converted back into the building blocks of life. "This is how they work," Dr. Liji explained, her energy form now blazing like a small star. "The shepherds don't destroy anything. They convert matter and energy into these storage crystals, then transport them to something vast and hungry, in the space between galaxies. But the process can be reversed," Engineer Choi Min added, his dimensional flickering stabilizing as he concentrated on the demonstration. "We've learned to feed the crystal's energy back into reality. What was consumed can be restored." The assembly hall fell completely silent as the implications sank in. Representatives who had been demanding the humans' imprisonment now stared in wonder at the miniature solar systems spinning in the containment field. Captain Hyun's voice filled the chamber, carrying harmonics that touched every species' consciousness directly. "The harmony isn't just our ship anymore. It's become something new, a fusion of human will and shepherd technology. Every corridor, every system, every particle of its hull has been transformed into a tool for restoration rather than consumption." Admiral Vextar's scales had settled into a deep gold color, the shade his species displayed when witnessing something sacred. "You've turned their own weapons against them." "More than that," Dr. Liji replied, her form now pulsing in rhythm with the restored crystal. "We've proven that evolution doesn't require abandoning what you are. It requires becoming more than what you were." The transformed humans stood together in the center of the chamber, their combined presence creating ripples in space-time that made the very air sing with possibility. Around them, hundreds of species from across the galaxy began to understand that they weren't facing invaders or monsters. They were looking at hope itself, given form and substance, and the power to fight back against the darkness that consumed worlds. Senator Krivex was the first to speak after the long silence. "What do you need from us?" Captain Hyun's galaxy-filled eyes swept across the assembly. "Time, trust, and the courage to change, because when the shepherds arrive in force, the galaxy we've known will end. The only question is whether we'll end with it or evolve into something they can't consume." The vote that followed was closer than anyone expected, but in the end, hope won over fear by a margin of 3 voices. The transformation of the galaxy had begun. The first sign of doom came from the Outer Rim Observatory on Station Kelthara. Astronomer Vexloth had been tracking stellar formations for over 40 years, his multiple eyes perfectly adapted for long-range space observation. But on this particular night shift, he witnessed something that made his blood freeze. "Control. This is Observatory 7, he transmitted, his voice shaking with disbelief. "I'm seeing impossible readings from the spiral arm delta sector." "Define impossible, Vexeloth," came the tired reply from Control Station. "Stars are going out. Not exploding, not collapsing, just stopping, like someone turned off a light switch across entire systems." Within the hour, panic spread across the galactic communication networks. Reports flooded in from every corner of the outer territories. The Kepler mining colony reported that their neighboring star had simply vanished, leaving their world in frozen darkness. The Harmony trading post sent frantic distress calls before their signals abruptly cut to silence. On Galactic Station Prime, Admiral Vextar stood before the massive tactical display, his scales cycling through deep purple shades of dread. The holographic map of the galaxy showed red zones spreading like cancer through the outer arms, areas where all communication had ceased, where space itself seemed to have gone dark. "How many systems?" he asked his tactical officer. 47. "Confirmed missing, sir. Another 112 not responding to hails." Commander Zelak's tentacles writhed nervously as she updated the display. "Sir, at this rate of expansion, they'll reach the core worlds within 6 standard cycles." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of emergency power systems. Everyone present understood what they were witnessing. The beginning of their galaxy's harvest. Deep in the station's modified chambers, Captain Kim Hyun felt the disturbance like a physical blow. His transformed consciousness stretched across multiple dimensions, and through that expanded awareness, he could sense the Shepherd Scouts probing reality's weak points, testing how much energy each system contained before consumption. "They're here," he announced to his crew, though his voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "The advance harvest has begun." The transformed Harmony responded to its captain's will before he even finished speaking. The ship's living hull rippled with anticipation, its bio-neural networks sparking with energy patterns that defied conventional physics. What had once been a simple exploration vessel was now something unprecedented, a weapon forged from human determination and alien technology. Lieutenant Park Soo flowed through the ship's corridors like liquid starlight, her consciousness already merging with the vessel's quantum systems. "Ship's ready, Captain. All restoration matrices are charged and waiting." Dr. Lee Ji existed in 3 different dimensions simultaneously as she prepared her equipment. Her energy form danced between medical scanners that had been transformed into life restoration devices and quantum computers that could calculate the exact atomic structure of annihilated worlds. Engineer Choi Min's flickering presence stabilized the ship's dimensional anchors. His job was perhaps the most dangerous, keeping the crew tethered to their home reality while they worked in the spaces between dimensions where the shepherds hunted. "Take us out," Captain Hyun commanded, his form stretching across the bridge, as his consciousness touched every system simultaneously. The Harmony didn't launch so much as phase out of normal space-time. One moment it was docked at the station, the next it existed in the quantum foam between realities, traveling faster than light by stepping outside the rules that governed conventional matter. Their destination was the Vega Nebula region, where 15 star systems had vanished in the past 6 hours. As they approached, the scope of destruction became clear through their enhanced senses. Where bustling civilizations had thrived just hours before, now only empty void remained. But to the transformed humans, the void wasn't truly empty. There, evolved perception could see the quantum echoes, the memory imprints that the universe itself preserved of what had existed. Every atom that had been consumed left traces in the fabric of space-time, like footprints in cosmic sand. "Shepherd Scouts detected," Lieutenant Park Soo reported, her consciousness interfacing directly with the ship's sensor arrays. 3 entities, operating in dimensional phase variant 7. Through the ship's sensors, they could see them. Creatures that existed between realities, feeding off the energy released when matter was converted to pure cosmic power. They moved like hungry shadows, stripping away the very foundations of existence itself. "Begin restoration protocol," Captain Hyun ordered, his voice harmonizing with frequencies that made reality itself respond. The Harmony transformed again, its hull opening like a flower to reveal chambers filled with crystallized space-time. Dr. Lee Ji extended her consciousness into the void, searching for the quantum memories of the consumed Vega systems. "I can feel them," she whispered, her energy form blazing brighter as she made contact with the ghost traces of annihilated worlds. 12 billion beings across 15 systems. Their final moments are still here, preserved in the quantum foam. Engineer Choi Min anchored the ship in normal space-time, while his crewmates worked in dimensions that would tear apart unprotected minds. Sweat that sparkled like liquid starlight beaded on his flickering forehead as he fought to keep them all from being lost in the dimensional chaos. What happened next had never been attempted by any species in galactic history. The transformed. Humans reached into empty space and began pulling matter back from the void itself. Using the quantum memory imprints as templates, they started rebuilding entire worlds from the energy traces left behind by the Shepherd's consumption. The first. Success was small, a single asteroid restored from quantum memory. But as Dr. Lee Ji's confidence grew, larger objects began to materialize. Moons, planets, then entire suns blazed back into existence, their nuclear fires rekindled from the fundamental forces that the universe remembered. A refugee convoy that had been fleeing the destruction stopped in amazement as their instruments detected impossible readings. Captain Zorthak of the merchant vessel, Lucky Break stared at his displays in disbelief. "Crew, are you seeing this?" he called to his bridge team. "The Vega primary star just came back. It's burning again like it never went out. On his communication screen." The familiar blue-white glow of Vega illuminated planets that had been dark and lifeless just minutes before. Across 15 star systems, worlds that had been consumed were returning to life. Their atmospheres restored, their populations awakening as if from a brief dream. Council observer Telrain, who had been monitoring the operation from a safe distance, transmitted her report with a voice full of wonder. "Control, this is impossible to explain through any known science. They're literally pulling entire civilizations back from extinction." Captain Hyun's response echoed across multiple dimensions as the harmony completed its work. "Not creation, observer. Memory. The universe never truly forgets what it once held. We've simply learned to help it remember." The Shepherd Scouts, faced with prey that could undo their consumption, retreated into deeper dimensional space. But everyone present knew this was just the beginning. The real harvest fleet was still coming, and when it arrived, the transformed humans would face their ultimate test. As the Harmony prepared to phase shift to the next consumption zone, 15 restored star systems blazed with renewed life behind them, proof that even the hunger of the void could be defeated by beings willing to evolve beyond their limitations. The galaxy's first victory against extinction had been won, but the war for survival had only just begun. The sensors of every observatory in the galaxy screamed warnings simultaneously. Something vast was approaching from the intergalactic void, something so massive that its gravitational field was bending light from distant star clusters. Admiral Vextar stood on the emergency command deck of Galactic Station Prime, watching. "Readings that shouldn't be possible. Size estimate?" he asked, though his voice barely carried over the alarms. "Approximately 3 light-years in diameter, sir," reported Commander Zelak, her tentacles trembling as she updated the display. "But it's not solid. It appears to be alive. A single consciousness spanning an area larger than most solar systems." The massive tactical screen, the Shepherd hive mind, revealed itself in all its terrible glory. It wasn't a ship or a creature in any sense that organic minds could comprehend. Instead, it was a writhing mass of dark energy and consumed matter, held together by the collective consciousness of every civilization it had devoured across eons of galactic harvests. Within its depths, the ghostly remnants of 1,000 different galaxies swirled like imprisoned souls. Ancient technologies from species that had been extinct for millions of years pulsed with malevolent life, all serving the singular purpose of consumption. This was the apex predator of the cosmos, and it had come to feast on their galaxy. But, as the hive mind approached, something unexpected happened. The space around the galaxy began to shimmer and pulse with familiar energy patterns. Every world that the transformed Harmony crew had restored over the past months suddenly blazed with the same dimensional light that flowed through the evolved humans. On the planet Kevrex, families that had been saved from the Shepherd Scouts felt a strange warmth spreading through their consciousness. Children playing in restored gardens looked up at their sun and saw it pulsing in rhythm with their own heartbeats. The star itself had become aware, connected to something vast and protective. Captain Kim Hyun no longer existed in any single location. His consciousness had spread across 17,000 restored worlds, each planet carrying a fragment of his evolved humanity. When he spoke, his voice came from the quantum structure of space itself. Ancient One. His words resonated through dimensions the hive mind had never encountered. "You've traveled far to harvest our galaxy, but you'll find we're no longer the prey you expected." The Shepherd hive mind paused in its approach, confusion rippling through its vast consciousness. In all its eons of existence, it had never been addressed directly by food. Civilizations screamed, begged, and fought, but they didn't speak to it as an equal. Through senses that spanned multiple realities, the hive mind examined the galaxy before it. What it found defied every pattern it had learned over millions of years of cosmic harvesting. The space itself was aware, watching it with billions of eyes that weren't quite eyes, thinking thoughts that weren't quite thoughts. Lieutenant Park Su's presence flowed through the quantum networks that now connected every restored star system. "Look around you, Devourer," she said, her consciousness dancing between planets like sunlight through leaves. "Do you see what's different about this meal?" The hive mind extended its sensory tendrils, probing the galaxy's defenses. Immediately, it recoiled in shock. Every time it tried to drain energy from a star or planet, the consumed energy flowed back doubled. The galaxy wasn't just resisting consumption, it was feeding energy back into itself faster than it could be taken. Dr. Li Ji existed as pure thought now, her consciousness woven into the life force of every restored world. "We learned from you," she explained, her voice carrying the warmth of a billion suns. "You showed us how to store the essence of life in crystalline matrices, but we found something you never discovered, how to use those matrices to create instead of destroy." Engineer Choi Min's flickering presence stabilized the dimensional barriers that kept the galaxy anchored in normal spacetime. His consciousness had become the foundation that prevented reality itself from being torn apart by the cosmic forces. Now in conflict. "Impossible," the hive mind's voice boomed across space, a sound like the death of stars. "I have consumed countless galaxies. Civilizations beyond counting have fed my growth. You are merely the latest harvest." But as it tried to begin the consumption process, something unprecedented happened. Instead of draining the galaxy's energy, the hive mind found its own essence being pulled away. The restored worlds had become nodes in a vast network that operated on principles of giving rather than taking. Every planet that the evolved humans had touched now pulsed with conscious intent. The vegan colonies felt the pull and consciously chose to share their life force with neighboring systems. The crystal beings of Arcturus opened their quantum matrices and allowed their stored energy to flow freely through the galactic network. "Captain," Hyun's consciousness pressed against the hive mind's awareness like a warm embrace that couldn't be shaken off. "You've spent eternity consuming, but you never learned to create. We've discovered something you can't understand, the power that comes from choosing to give everything away." The ancient entity that had devoured 1,000 galaxies felt something it had never experienced in its vast existence: fear. Not the simple terror of dying prey, but the deep existential dread of encountering something fundamentally beyond its comprehension. The humans had evolved into something that violated every law the hive mind understood. They had become beings who existed not to survive, but to nurture. Their consciousness didn't seek to preserve itself, but to spread itself freely through the cosmos, giving life instead of taking it. As the galactic network reached critical mass, the effect became visible to every species in the galaxy. Stars began to pulse in synchronized patterns, creating a light show that painted aurora across 1,000,000 different worlds. The very fabric of spacetime started to sing with harmonics that touched every consciousness, from the smallest insect to the mightiest spacefaring civilization. The shepherd hive mind, for the first time in its existence, began to dissolve. But not through destruction, through transformation. The evolved human's consciousness flowed into it like a healing balm, showing it memories of creation instead of consumption, of love instead of hunger. "No!" the entity raged, fighting against the transformation. "I am the harvester. I am eternal." "Hunger, I cannot be changed." But it was too late. The network of human consciousness had grown too strong, too interconnected. Every world, every star, every particle of space dust in the galaxy now carried the essence of humanity's choice to evolve beyond survival into something greater. Dr. Li Ji's gentle presence surrounded the dissolving hive mind like a mother's embrace. "You don't have to be hungry anymore," she whispered. "Let us show you what it feels like to be full." The transformation took 3 days and nights. Across the galaxy, every species watched their stars pulse with new rhythms as the ancient devourer learned what it meant to give life instead of taking it. When the process completed, the hive mind still existed, but it had become something new, a gardener instead of a harvester, nurturing young civilizations in distant voids instead of consuming them. The evolved humans had won not through violence, but through the ultimate act of evolution, choosing to become the universe's capacity for love made manifest. On worlds across the galaxy, children looked up at stars that now twinkled with gentle warmth, each pulse a reminder that somewhere, in the quantum foam, human consciousness watched over them with infinite patience and care. The galaxy had become a garden, and humanity its eternal guardians. The age of consumption had ended. The age of infinite growth had begun. The end